In this episode of Flying Through Time, we travel along the development path of the giants. These are the planes and other craft that seem to defy gravity. They're the planes that have stopped us in awe. These colossal aircraft have had millions of people visit airports just to view the grace in which most of them took to the air. Let's now fly through history to witness the breakthroughs that have given us planes like the 747. The Antonov 124 is really a giant among giants. On its maiden flight in December 1982, it was the largest powered craft to fly. The Antonov is still the world's largest heavy-lift aircraft. The vital statistics of the AN model include a payload capacity of 330,000 pounds, a cruising speed of 469 miles per hour, and a range of 24,000 miles when fully loaded. Testimony to its capability is an entry in the Guinness Book of Records of an Antonov carrying a 135-ton payload. It's recorded as the heaviest single cargo to be carried by air. The 124 is capable of front or rear loading, or even drive-off, drive-on loading, which was originally designed for military use. The front wheels retract, allowing the AH-124 to kneel, hence reducing the angle of the front ramp. This attribute permits large vehicles complete with their load to be driven on board and transported as a unit. It's a military design that's helped establish a new segment of the air freight market: the transportation of oversized and very heavy cargoes. At air shows, the 124's size and handsome appearance always draws crowds. The size of the cargo hold is approximately 131 feet long and 20 feet wide. Its overall length is 227 feet and it has a wingspan of 240 feet. "34 on-board computers assist the crew. The crew of 6 consist of 2 pilots, 2 engineers, a navigator and a radio operator." The 124 Antonov and the American C-5 Galaxy are the first true giant cargo carriers. The technology to progress to larger craft is available. However, hangar sizes, parking bay sizes and runway lengths also determine how big we can go. Surprisingly, the largest aircraft ever built would dwarf the 124 Antonov. Airships took to the skies around 1900. At that time, the aeroplane was a very basic contraption that offered very little payload. Von Zeppelin is regarded as the father of the airship, and by the outbreak of World War I, his Zeppelins could achieve 85 miles per hour, reach a height of 14,000 feet, and carry 4,500 pounds of bombs. Von Zeppelin's success inspired many countries to develop airship technology. The United States Navy was also inspired and went on to build the Shenandoah, Akron, and the Macon. The airships served the Navy well, but their time was running out as advancement in aeroplanes was moving quickly. Unfortunately, many regard the airship as relatively unsuccessful. Perhaps newspaper images depicting wrecks and fireballs, such as these of the Shenandoah, imprinted strong feelings of skepticism in the public mind. The truth is that many airships were built and flown successfully. There were some spectacular accidents, but few lives were lost. Perhaps the public's natural skepticism of flight in general during the airship's reign is responsible for today's misunderstanding of these lighter-than-air giants. The airships of yesteryear are still the largest craft ever flown. The Hindenburg was over 820 feet long, and that's more than twice the length of anything we fly today. World War I proved that planes did have a significant role to play on the battlefield. However, greater payloads were required. Built in 1922, the Barling was the first attempt at building a really large bomber and was designed from the ground up. The result was a triplane, which was powered by 6 420 horsepower Liberty 12A liquid-cooled engines. 4 of the engines were in tractor configuration, while 2 more engines were placed in a pushing arrangement. The main landing gear had an incredible 10 wheels, and the box-like tail had a horizontal biplane design, which had 4 separate rudders. Its performance was appalling. The Barling was not a success, and the sole Barling was scrapped in 1928. It wasn't until May of 1941 that a true modern bomber was finally flown. The XB-19 was an all-metal, stress-skin, low-winged monoplane with a retractable undercarriage. Its wingspan of 209 feet made it the largest American plane to be built, and it remained so until 1946. The XB-19 project was top secret, and no production was ever planned, the sole aim seeing how far the state-of-the-art could be pushed. It will surprise many people that some of the true giants of aviation are seaplanes. The Martin Mars is one example. It has a wingspan of 200 feet and a height of 48 feet. The Mars was the largest aircraft in operation from 1942 until the first Boeing 747 flew. The Mars is still the largest operational flying boat. On November the 5th, 1941, the prototype was launched from the Martin factory in Little River. Unfortunately, during testing, she threw a propeller blade from the No. 3 engine, which started a fire. It took 6 months to repair the damage. The plane was a huge success and broke many records. The Mars broke the endurance record by staying aloft for 32 hours and 17 minutes and covering 4,600 miles. This is still respectable by today's standards. Fire has played a major role in the Mars history. Some are still used today as water bombers and can wet down 3 to 4 acres per drop. The other example of large seaplanes is the HK-1. The Hercules flying boat was the largest aeroplane ever built. Howard Hughes designed the craft, and his small but dedicated team constructed the aircraft. The Hercules' first and only flight occurred on November the 2nd, 1947. Howard Hughes fired up the 8 radial engines for taxi tests and thrilled thousands of onlookers with an unannounced flight. The Hercules lifted 10 meters and flew 1 mile in less than a minute at a top speed of 130 kilometers per hour before making a perfect landing. After the historic event, the Hercules was returned to its hangar, never to fly again. As ordered by Hughes, it was constantly maintained and kept in flight-ready condition until he died in 1976. In the meantime, the military was still focused on lift aircraft. A major redesign of the C-74 Globemaster bore the new C-124. The C-124 utilized front-loading doors, which became a standard feature for future transports. An elevator under the aft fuselage with an electric hoist was also a great improvement over trying to load through side doors. The first flight by a C-124 took place on the 27th of November 1949, and the first operational aircraft were delivered in May 1950. Production ran through to May 1955. The improved 124C had more powerful engines, wingtip-mounted combustion heaters that provided cabin heating, and wing and tail surface de-icing. The C-124 can be considered as the first real tactical transports, as they set the pattern for today's transports. Their success was due to logic of design that focused exclusively on cargo rather than a compromise for dual purposes. However, new designs arrived that made the C-124 obsolete. Not all planes get melted down to be recycled into new designs. Some stratocruisers, for example, underwent major mechanical surgery to become pregnant guppies. The guppies played a major role in the Apollo missions by transporting major components of the Apollo spacecraft. The end of World War II led to many cancelled bomber orders, so Boeing started converting military technologies into civilian applications. From the B-29 bomber came the Stratocruiser, which later became Guppies. Boeing saw a rising public interest in intercontinental flights that were comfortable, safe and fast. Boeing met those demands with the 377 Stratocruiser. The plane was a double-decker design that could accommodate 81 passengers in the upper cabin and 14 in lower-level bar and lounge, which was accessible by a spiral staircase. "28 sleeping berths were located in the forward cabin for long flights. Passengers experienced glamour on the Stratocruiser and were even treated to in-flight fashion shows on flights between Chicago and Minneapolis. Unfortunately, the Stratocruiser quickly lost popularity. The Pratt and Whitney engines were costly and temperamental and often caused delays, and the glamorous design was no longer admired as sleeker planes began to dominate the skies. The Stratocruiser was the last piston engine plane to be retired from service, and apart from its size, it's mostly remembered for its first-class luxury. The Guppies transported the Apollo rocket stages from California to Florida. Apart from flying the rockets, the only other option was a slow boat through the Panama Canal. The Guppies cut months out of the Apollo schedules, and without them, a moon landing in 1969 would not have been remotely possible. The Guppies have a most interesting way of being loaded. They're actually split in two. The cargo is then loaded, and the two sections of the aircraft are rejoined. This was a major operation and was only suitable for the transportation of specific items, such as booster rockets. A later version of this craft was called a Super Guppy. The cargo section diameter was increased from the pregnant Guppy's 19 feet to 25 feet, and the fuselage was also stretched by 25.5 feet. In the race to supply the military with transport aircraft, it was the Lockheed Company that won. The four-jet C-141 Starlifter was a winner from day one. Due to the wing oscillation, the fuel tanks had to be an articulated design. The four huge jet engines had a reverse thrust of 40% to assist landing on short runways. In fact, the C-141 was the first jet transporter. The Starlifter's engines were capable of lifting much more weight than the plane could actually hold. This was addressed in later versions of the plane. The problem was resolved by stretching the aircraft's fuselage. During the 1970s, the entire fleet of 270 aircraft was returned to Lockheed for modification. The planes were lengthened by 7.16 metres, which increased cargo capacity by about 1/3. As of today, the plane has been made in 30 different configurations. The prototype flew on the 60th anniversary of the Wright brothers' first flight. This was December the 17th, 1963. The first C-141A was delivered for service in October 1964. The service life of the C-141 Starlifter fleet is coming to an end. A gradual retirement phase-out has begun and is expected to be complete by 2006. Again, the Lockheed Company won a contract to build a bigger transport, and in 1970, the C-5 Galaxy was delivered. Lockheed kept all the best features of the Starlifter: the distinctive high T-tail, 25-degree wing sweep, and 4 turbofan engines mounted on pylons beneath the wings. The C-5 is similar in appearance to its smaller sister, the C-141, but the C-5 is substantially larger. The massive wingspan and weight caused considerable wing oscillation. This challenged the designers and engineers of the day. The answer was a highly sophisticated computer-controlled damping system. As with any large wingspan, movement and flex is expected. However, the C-5 without the damper is excessive. This shot is the C-5 flying with the damper disabled. Without aerial refueling, a C-5 can fly 2,600 nautical miles. With aerial refueling, the aircraft's range is limited only by a cruise endurance. The C-5 is one of the largest aircraft in the world. It can carry outsize and oversized cargo worldwide and can take off or land on relatively short runways. Like the Antonov, the landing gear can be knelt, so the cargo floor is at truck bed height to assist vehicle loading and unloading. Ground crews can load and offload the C-5 simultaneously. In fact, the full-width drive-on ramps allow for loading double rows of vehicles. The largest success of the plane is its ability to be able to take off fully loaded within 8,000 feet and land within 5,000. A study confirmed the C-5 still had an airframe service life of 80%, so an aggressive program to modernize the C-5 was initiated. The program began in 1998 and included upgrading avionics, improving navigation and safety equipment, and installing a new autopilot system. Another part of the plan dealt with new engines, pylons, and auxiliary power units. This modernization program will ensure the C-5 will be used well into the 21st century. Finally, civilian aircraft were being developed with the sole purpose of moving people. Unlike the Stratocruiser, which had military beginnings, planes like the Boeing 707 were the first true breed of international people movers. These could seat 220 people and had a range of almost 4,000 miles. Other smaller examples, such as the 727, were designed for national flights. However, it was Boeing's huge gamble to build a plane that made international travel affordable to the masses that changed international tourism. "75,000 engineering drawings were used to produce the first 747. The first 747 completed more than 15,000 hours of wind tunnel testing. The original 747 flight test program, which led to the aeroplane certification for commercial service in December 1969, used 5 aeroplanes and lasted 10 months. The 747-400 tail height is 63 feet 8 inches, equivalent to a 6-story building. The 747-400 has 6 million parts, half of which are fasteners. It has 171 miles of wiring and 5 miles of tubing, and the body and airframe contain 147,000 pounds of high-strength aluminium. The maiden flight of the 747 was held on the 9th of February 1969, and Pan Am was the first commercial airliner to fly a jumbo on the 22nd of January 1970. The 747 fleet has flown more than 35 billion miles, or the equivalent of 74,000 round trips to the moon. It's carried 3.6 billion passengers. That's more than half of the world's population. A 747-400 typically takes off at 180 miles per hour, cruises at 565 miles per hour, and lands at 160 miles per hour. For a typical international flight, one 747 operator uses about 5.5 tons of food supplies. Its engine noise is half of what it was on the original 747s delivered in 1970. It would be doubted that any other aircraft in history has made such a difference to the average person's ability to experience international travel. The jumbo's passenger carrying ability can be improved by designing even larger planes or making them faster. In fact, the world's longest airliner, the giant 340-600, is already with us. This Airbus, which can carry nearly 500 passengers, is quieter than any of today's other big jets. Amongst the first airlines to buy one is Virgin Atlantic, and other companies will surely follow. But it's doubtful many aeroplanes of the future will capture our imagination like the Boeing Jumbo did. That concludes another episode of Flying Through Time. Join us again next when we further delve into our short but colourful history of flight.